Welcome to Breathe California TV. My name is Terry Trumbull. I'm a volunteer for the Lung Health Organization in California. Breathe California has 5 chapters throughout the state, and we were created to work with real live people. So last year we helped 150,000 people with breathing difficulties. But today we're going to talk about preventing that lung damage. We're talking with Chris Lepe, who's the South Bay Director of TransForm, the leading organization in the Bay Area to encourage pedestrians and bike use instead of just relying on cars. We'll talk with Chris in 30 seconds.
It's given me a chance to go out and be with people who has the same problem, and it helps you to manage your life better too, because you hear different things from each person, and it's just been really helpful in many ways.
Welcome back to Breathe California TV. My name is Terry Trumbull. I'm the chair of the Environmental Health Committee for Breathe California of the Bay Area. We're located here in San Jose, and we're happy to have you join us. I'm also happy to have Chris Lepe join us for second, third time on this show. Chris is with TransForm, located about a half block away from the San Jose State campus and about the same distance from City Hall. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So what does TransForm do?
Well, so we're a regional transportation advocacy organization, and we focus on transportation, land use, and housing policy in order to create more walkable communities, more livable communities, more affordable communities, and more climate-friendly communities as well. And so really we're trying to reduce the cost of living for Bay Area households, as well as reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution as a region, while increasing access to opportunity, in particular for those who have the least access, which you can say are people with disabilities, seniors, low-income individuals, and so forth.
Yeah, and we're going to need to talk about that because good transportation policies actually reduce the amount of money that people have to spend. If we could get more housing nearer to jobs, obviously that's one of the things I would assume you guys want to do.
Yeah, that's right. Some of the big problems that we have in the Bay Area as far as transportation, which are also connected to cost of living, is that we have very separate land uses, what they call, right? So they have jobs, in certain parts, primarily in Santa Clara County, and like places like Paul Walton and Mountain View, very job-rich areas, and then the housing in a whole other sections of the county. And so those kind of physical separation and significant distances between where people live and where people work cause people to drive, longer distances. Clog up our roadways, combined with the fact that our public transit system and other options are relatively scarce and not all that efficient and world class. We get the situation that we have in Santa Clara County, where we have among the highest percentage of people commuting to work by automobile than any other place in the nation, really.
Yeah, I haven't seen the 2010 statistics, but when I was on the County Planning Commission in 2000, this county had the longest trip lengths in the country. That is the distance between homes and jobs. It's pretty startling how bad it's become. We've done very well on jobs, obviously, but the cities haven't been willing to allow homes to go with it.
Yeah, no, totally. We're definitely a mega commute region, and I think a lot of times when we think about how we plan our communities, we think within the context of our surrounding neighborhoods or our specific city. But the reality is that for the jobs, where people work here in Silicon Valley, we have people commuting from all the way beyond our county's borders into other counties, and even actually outside the Bay Area. So it's a tremendous challenge, and so that's why our organization exists, is to increase access, to opportunity, to reduce the cost of living for households, and very connected, the environmental challenge that we have on our hands here with climate change and the air we breathe.
So we haven't said it overtly, but I assume besides pursuing more ability to walk, more ability to bike, that TransForm is very big on mass transit.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think when you look at Santa Clara County, I mean, I'll just give my personal experience. Growing up here, I was born in Southern California, but moved here when I was about 10 years old. And for me, the primary modes of getting around outside of being, driven around by my family, was walking and biking. And that extended out into even today. I get around by walking and biking, as I think probably a lot of people do. Maybe not as much as we would like, but when I graduated from high school, that's when I discovered the transit system in the South Bay, and trying to access my job and trying to access my educational opportunities when I was going out to De Anza College. And having been to other parts of the world, such as Mexico City, Europe, I was shocked by how poorly run and just inefficient our bus and rail and transit system overall is in the South Bay. It was actually faster for me at that time to bike from South Central San Jose over to De Anza College than to take public transportation. So when you have that kind of situation, that's not good, not just for the people that depend on the system, but also for everyone else that is forced to drive because they don't have other viable options. And then everybody else that wants to drive is stuck in more traffic because we have less people taking advantage of the transit system that we have. So,
yeah, it's pretty scary. This is anecdotal and not exactly new, but that's my point. I took a transportation planning class because I was allowed a few electives in my postdoctoral legal program. And the worst example, now this is 1973, that they gave in the country for sprawl was not LA, which is what I thought, but it was San Jose. And then the second startling thing for me is 1976, I was appointed to the County Planning Commission, and we had nothing to do with transportation planning. Transportation planning and land use planning are treated as two completely separate subjects, when it's a little hard to miss transportation being so important in the land use process.
Absolutely. It's very important to integrate our transportation and our land use planning. Since that time, however, I think our forefathers, the folks that planned out or didn't plan out our valley, have left us with a pretty difficult situation in terms of breaking that cycle of auto reliance and really giving people more options and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and whatnot, right? So they've left us with a tremendous challenge. But in terms of how we're planning moving forward, what is exciting is that the transportation and the land use integration is taking place more so, significantly more so than back probably when you were on those commissions. And so with Plan Bay Area, which is our regional plan for the Bay Area for transportation and land use, there is that attempt to integrate how we grow as well as how we plan for transportation. And then here in Santa Clara County, there's various different planning processes which are taking into account both things, which is good. It's a really, really important step.
So I think one of the things we ought to do is just let everybody know how much background and credibility that you've got in the things you're talking about. It's been my honor to work with you for 10 or 15 years, even though you don't look like it. But tell us a little bit about your background. For example, my recollection is you got a master's in planning from San Jose State.
Correct, yeah, so I have my BA, my bachelor's in environmental studies from UC Santa Cruz, where I transferred after going to De Anza College. And then after a few years of working with what was then known as the Transportation and Land Use Coalition, which was really my first real job after college. I ended up going to grad school at San Jose State, where I received my master's in urban and regional planning. And I've been with the organization now for about 10 years with TransForm, and it's been a pleasure working with the organization and working on these kinds of issues that are really important to me personally, as well as for our future.
So you've been doing great things the whole time that I've known you. Talk a little bit about whether you can use some help. You've got an office, I assume, still on South 7th Street.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So if 10 people in our audience want to call you up and say, I want to come help you save the world, can you use them?
Absolutely. So I think there's a few ways in which we can affect change, and really I think what the recipe has been for having an impact on these kind of policies. So one is just people getting engaged, activating community members, students, and other individuals, employees in particular areas to get involved and have a voice in these very important policy decisions. We also bring to the table data and policy analysis, breaking these really sometimes complex policies and proposals down and digesting them and then crafting alternative proposals. That's a big part of our work. And then also offering different models and alternatives is also really important. But fundamentally, community engagement is very important, and if people are interested in getting involved in transforming their communities and the way we get around, then they should definitely contact me, because there's lots of opportunities to get involved.
So Chris's contact information will be on the screen several times, as well as the website. I feel like Breathe California has a lot in common with TransForm, even though we're essentially a lung health organization. But as I have mentioned to you, I know you know well, 10 years ago, we were, after 100 years, had been part of a big national organization, and they said, we give up. We're not going to do community engagement. We're just going to raise money and run ads, and like us, they give 25% of their money to lung research. Mm-hmm. But we said, people make a difference. Those 150,000 people that we help with quitting smoking or making it easier for them to breathe in school with childhood asthma, or right now we have an asthma camp going where students with the same breathing disabilities are in a program together instead of having to compete with people that are healthy. Mm-hmm. And the similarity, of course, to me is that TransForm is saying, we're not just going to raise money and run ads, we're actually working in the community.
Definitely. If I were to go out as an advocate, I live in San Jose, right? But we have a lot of different cities here in Santa Clara County that have very important policies and proposals taking place. And they play an important role. Palo Alto, Mountain View as being examples of places that have a lot of jobs and not enough housing. And that does impact the region. That impacts San Jose. However, if I, as an individual, go and speak before city council in Palo Alto, let's say, or Mountain View, how much are they really going to hear me out, given that I'm not a local resident? So that's why it's so important that we engage those individuals living in the communities that are impacted, that have a stake in these processes, to have a voice to speak up and to get organized in order to affect the kind of changes that we would like to see for our future.
Yeah, and so I would urge everybody in the audience, whatever way you think the world could be better, join up with that organization. If you can participate, go help Chris, or go down to or call up Breathe California, because we need the help. So we're going to take a break in about a minute, but we at Breathe California in the entire Bay Area gave our Outstanding Community Engagement Award to TransForm. Can you talk a little bit about that award?
Yeah, well, it was a great recognition. Definitely honored to have received it, and really, I think it highlights, I think sometimes it's difficult to connect the dots as far as like the impact of our work. we work on transportation, but what does that really mean for health or for safety or for social equity, or in this case the environment? And so having those kind of recognitions is an important thing, and we really definitely appreciate it, to have that little feather in our cap to say we are impacting air quality, and we have this recognition from such a respected organization.
So, and I would urge any of you that want to know a little bit more about the connection, next week's show is going to feature Dr. Alan Goldsobel, who's on the Breathe California board, explaining the connection between air pollution and about 13 different lung disorders that affect your health. We'll be back in 30 seconds for more with Chris Lepe of TransForm.
The nice thing about Better Breathers Club is we go in and there's other people sitting around with oxygen. It's almost a relief that everybody looks the same in the room. It's a funny thing to say, but it's a good feeling. Breathe California means having resources available to us that will help guide us and make our lives easier.
Welcome back to Breathe California TV. I'm Terry Trumbull. Our guest is Chris Lepe, the South Bay manager of TransForm, the leading Bay Area group pushing for alternative transit, making walking, biking, mass transit easier or more feasible. So Chris, you brought in this chart, which I suspect our audience can't read. Could you walk it through it and explain what it's all about?
Sure. This is from our strategic plan, and we have a 5-year plan for our organization as far as what we would like to achieve in the coming years. And we actually went through a pretty extensive process to decide on what our approach is going to be, how we're going to make an impact in people's lives and in the broader Bay Area and our communities. And so really, if you look at this portion of the chart, this is what we're trying to achieve. We want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, given the very serious climate crisis that we're confronted with. We want to reduce the cost of housing and transportation, which are the two highest, most significant costs for households. And we want to increase rates and safety of walking and biking, along with increased access to jobs via public transportation. So this is really what we're all about. This is what we're trying to do. Now, how do we get there? That's where the theory of change comes into play. And so we need to, and we do, build powerful partnerships. We participate in coalitions with different organizations, from labor to environment to health to safety. You name it. We collaborate with anybody and anyone that wants to work with us in achieving this kind of vision. We engage communities, as we've talked about already, doing things like surveying of different residents. And then, as far as the key portion here of this chart, there's a few different things that we feel we need. One is good plans, like the ones that we talked about. San Jose's general plan sets forth a really, I think, great vision for the city. And so we need to see more of that. They're calling for more people walking, biking, and taking public transit, which is awesome. State leadership, we need more funding to be able to finance these plans. And so we need more funding from the state as well as from regions and local governments. And then finally, we need examples. So having innovation take place and models that can inspire changes and really get people to think differently about how we plan for our communities. And so, yeah, that's essentially, I think, what it gets down to. And really the core of achieving this vision, going back to community engagement, is mobilizing communities, is working in coalitions, and really trying to impact the process through the democratic process that we have.
So my own experience wants to really highlight examples. One of the things people think is that their elected officials just go out and take chances, or they're going to do something new and innovative. I chaired a state agency for 6 years, and the studies we did said that local officials don't function that way. They need real live examples, and we funded, in this case, innovative ideas in recycling, like the first curbside recycling that was done, and then it could be picked up by San Jose or Campbell to go do it, because they had an example where it worked in Santa Rosa or in Mountain View or some other place. So giving people examples means that local government people don't think like they're doing something that, well, if it doesn't work, they'll get their political necks chopped off.
Yeah, and you know, so we have to function within the status quo, and there's certain things that and decisions that are made just based on pure inertia and the way that things have always been done in the past. And so it really takes creating new models and providing evidence as well as community support to kind of break that cycle of, for example, planning around convenience for autos, but not around convenience necessarily for other users, such as people that walk, bike, and take transit. So one example I'll give is our green trip model, which is essentially like an organic certification for new development. So if you look at conventional agriculture and conventional products, you know, food products, you're not assured that it's going to be good for the planet and good for your health necessarily. Organic tries to get at that. And so we have a green trip program where we certify projects that have low transportation impacts and give people more options to be able to get around. And so we actually have a zero parking certification. We just certified our first zero parking development. I think it's over 100 units that without a single parking space for the residents. And how do we make that happen? We've provided, you know, working with a developer, really great transportation options, a variety of different tools, including, for example, car sharing, bike sharing, free transit passes for the residents for the life of the project, and giving people as many alternatives as possible to driving, so that if you don't want to own a car, you're not having to move into a unit, whether it be a condo or a rental that has a parking space there for you, which you're having to pay, right, in terms of your rent. So that's an example right there of the kind of models that we're trying to do to inspire action. But going back to the way that elected officials make decisions as well, I think a lot of council members and mayors want to make the right decision, but they're constrained oftentimes by the political realities that surround them. And so, I think oftentimes when you have a particular proposal that takes place, such as a new rapid transit line that's going to take space from cars in order to provide more options for people, what you end up having coming out of the woodwork are the people that are against the project. And you don't necessarily always have people with as much force coming out and saying, this is something that we really need and we really want. And so that voice is really important, because otherwise, if no one shows up in the supportive side, then oftentimes these projects either get shot down or watered down. And so that's what we try to do. We try to mobilize the yes bees instead of the NIMBYs, the people that do want good development in their neighborhoods, want good transportation options, so that there's at least a sort of a counterbalance to the folks that are always going to show up, which are the nay team. So
both sides of what you were just talking about present a wonderful statement. People make a difference. Mm-hmm. It's easy for us to think, we're 7.5 billion people on Earth and we don't make a difference. But you just said, if I don't like something or I do like something, people are listening. Government's listening.
Definitely. Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's the reason that Breathe California exists, rather than some organization in New York City that says, just send us a check. We can't be bothered with helping or working with people. But your note is a real strong one of optimism and a wonderful comment on the organization.
Yeah, I think so. And I think ultimately what it comes down to is one of the things I feel very strongly about is that oftentimes in our democratic system, whether you're talking about healthcare or education or transportation, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And what's the squeaky wheel? Well, usually it's higher income, individuals with more resources, more time, more money, frankly.
And who frankly show up to vote, as opposed to those
They show up to vote, and they show up to city councils, and they know how to manipulate the system. Especially within these smaller cities and even places like San Jose. What I find to be very satisfying is that we really try to engage the diversity that exists within these various different cities like San Jose, like Santa Clara, Sunnyvale, and making sure the voice of young people is represented, the voice of the elderly is represented, the voice of immigrants, people of color, low-income individuals, and that they're showing up to the meetings and letting the elected officials know this is what we need. You might be hearing from this one camp and this one very specific demographic, which quite frankly is in the minority, but this is what our communities need, and we're just as important. And so for me, what that means is we are actually strengthening and creating a more, a better democratic system. We are giving voice to the voiceless, and that is really when it comes down to it, part of what, I enjoy the most about the work that I do.
Yeah, and you ought to. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we have incredible housing costs. My next door neighbor rented the house for $4,000. It's a doctor who couldn't afford it. He's moving to Portland, paying $1,000 a month for a bigger house. And we've got to make housing affordable by having the housing growth match the job growth that we're having. One of the things, and I apologize, I'm stealing your stuff, but talk about smart growth. A lot of people think, well, gosh, where do we put it? We're built out, but the general plan says we've got lots of opportunity on BART, Caltrain, light rail stops to build up right there at those spots.
Yeah, so we have two options as far as what I can see as far as how we grow. We either grow near good transit and in areas where there are jobs and services, or we sprawl out and grow out into green fields, open space, agricultural areas, and gobble that up just as we gobbled up most of what used to be the Valley of Heart's Delight.
So with about 30 seconds left, I think you've done a good job of summarizing that one. What do you want people to remember off of our talk today?
So I think a lot of us think about how things were in the past and how things are today, but it's important to think about the future, and the future means that actually we're going to grow quite a bit. So 2 times the size of the city of Sunnyvale is what we're going to be growing in terms of population over the next 15 years. So let's think about that, and how are we going to grow, where are we going to place our jobs, our homes, and how do we want to invest our transit? Do we want to continue to just widen our highways as a solution, or do we want to be able to provide great transit and more people for to walk and bike? And so if you're interested,
I have to apologize. We're out of time here. We've been talking with Chris Lepe of TransForm. I hope you'll volunteer either for Breathe California or TransForm, and see you next week.